brain at this point.
Happy Depression Vacation Podcast.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been a week, but it's been another week. Maybe
Does it feel for you like longer or shorter?
Oh, significantly longer.
I don't know how I feel like I was just here. I don't know.
It's mostly because the last 3 days have been like...
Time isn't real.
Yeah, something happens when you're sick. It just... You lose track of those days, and it just feels like an interminable march toward death.
Yeah, before we get further on this, we have our special guest friend, Wallace, who is our favorite podcast friend, as evidenced by the fact that Ryan is here and we banished him to a corner to read a Dungeons & Dragons book.
Well, it's better than the alternative. You might have left him in the car again.
He's been in the car a couple of times.
Yeah,
and I always feel bad. It reminds me of that episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Dee is dating the army guy. It's the Dennis System episode. And then she just leaves him in the car with the windows up, and they're like...
And he's trying to get through the crack. I remember that.
And they're like, Dee, you made him sit in the car? And she's like, well, it's not that I made him sit there. It's just I didn't tell him not to. So he just kind of does whatever I want.
Well, it was kind of funny because when we rolled up, I was like, hey, let's go. And he was like, oh, I just assumed I was going to be having to stay in the car.
Oh, Brian.
Well, that might be good news. He knows his place already.
Usually I would invite him to be in the room here with us, but the one time we tried to do 4 people on the podcast, it's like you're sharing with 2 people sharing a mic. It just got thingy.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the old-timey way they recorded Motown songs in the early 60s, where they had the backup singers surrounding one microphone.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, so that's kind of how we recorded our Vidjam song, actually, because we only had 3 microphones and we had 10 people. So we sort of organized it in a way that, because the way the song kind of goes, as you'll see on Sunday, is that there's 2 people to a verse who sing solos. And so we just sort of arranged it that, like, for any particular verse, the people were not on the same mic for those ones.
Yeah, no 2 soloists.
And honestly, it worked out really well for everyone except for Toby, weirdly enough, was a little bit low on volume, but everybody else was perfectly fine. So, and I tweaked it in post, so...
Well, that would be one way to up the production value of the podcast, is have your own in-house background singers to run riffs.
We missed it. Where's Ryan? Get him back in.
Oh my gosh. It'd be like, this might be after your time. Do you ever see Hannah Montana?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so...
Oh my God, yes. Hannah Montana was not after my time. Like, Hilary Duff was a year younger than me. So
but Hilary Duff and Hannah Montana in Disney, like, lifetime are like 2 entirely different generations. Because I never saw Lizzie McGuire. Like, never saw it. It was
I just mixed them up, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Okay,
yeah,
so
I've not seen
Hannah Montana. Okay,
Yeah.
so every time it would go to commercial, and then every time they returned from commercial, she would do these riffs, and so on the way out, it'd be like something ominous, like oh whoa, and then she'd come back and she'd be like, da 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 da, like it was really, that was like a whole thing, and it's like a meme now. And
well, my point of reference is like Tony Orlando and Dawn, or Ray Charles and the Raylettes.
Oh, I remember how the one goes, because it's like it goes like whoa 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 whoa, yeah. That's it. And it's like you had to sit through that whole thing every time they came back from commercial.
It's kind of like if anybody ever listens to it's Ask Me Another. Jonathan Colton is like their in-house musician who does songs and stuff like that, and he pops up in a lot of places. Like, he does all the music for riff tracks as well. So maybe we need an in-house musician, a Reggie Watts or.
I mean, we're just always wheels turning to get the production value of this podcast to a new level, We
make up songs with some regularity.
Oh, yeah.
Which is akin to the musical improv.
I feel like every time I'm on, I inevitably sing a little piece of a song here and there.
Totally.
Yeah. It's just the way I relate to the world.
It's the podcast where anything can happen.
Tangentially, Wallace and I have a big show with our musical improv group this afternoon.
Ooh.
Which will be over by the time people listen to this podcast on Monday morning.
Yeah, so future people, you suck.
But yeah, I'm excited because it's our first show outside of the hit. So.
Yeah, and it's part of a fundraiser for the Little Theater of Mechanicsburg, which if you've never been there, I totally recommend. It is the most adorable little red house. It's like the Little Red Riding Hood of the local theater scene.
I've actually never been inside of it, but I've driven past it a bunch of times because it's like right next to it's right across the bridge in Mechanicsburg, right?
Well, now's your chance. And Christine and Ben have done a couple shows there, I know.
Pippin was there, right?
From Improv, yeah. And I remember the last thing I was supposed to do before everything shut down for COVID, I was supposed to see a show there, like the night that everything shut down. And anyway, I just donated my tickets. It's not a big deal. But Little Theater in Mechanicsburg, they're still, they have a silent auction. So if you weren't able to be there for our show, The Offbeats, you can still support the Little Theater in Mechanicsburg because it's the little theater that could.
Aww.
Yeah.
I saw a show there a while back. It was a musical. I can't think of what the name of it was, but I'm going to try my best to describe it. It was a 4-person cast, and it was about, like, love. And I want to say it was about, like, first dates or something like that. I don't know. I'm probably not giving enough information. But it was very well done.
You're also talking to the probably... Well, Hal knows some musicals.
I know lots of musicals.
Yeah.
I'm the worst person to try to guess the musical because that's not my jam.
In fact, like a weird frequent answer on Jeopardy that has come up recently in a couple of episodes, Assassins has been the answer to several questions there, and I know what the musical is specifically because of Ben.
Yeah.
Because Ben was the last thing I remember him being in before everything shut down was Assassins, because Dan Bixler was in that too.
Oh, did you? If you saw Assassins,
I did not see it.
Oh, okay.
The last thing I just remember him being in.
Oh, sorry. I'm inadvertently calling you out for not going to your friend's shows.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I never go to my friends' shows. I feel like a piece of shit about it. So
I feel like a piece of shit about it too because like it's mostly my schedule precludes me from because I work 12 to 8, or thankfully I don't have to work this shift as often anymore. But like for about 2 years. We were regularly working until like 10:30, 2 to 3 nights a week until my job got their part-timer situation squared away. And like, for instance, I've been wanting to see The Exorcist for like the entire month here. And the only days I had available were the last 3 to see it. And I've been sick the last couple of days. So like.
Yeah. Well, and Josh is in a similar boat. He works every weekend at the State Museum. So...
Yeah.
Very often we'll have, like, we only have, like, narrow windows of time that we can do things together.
Yeah.
So.
That's how my best friend is. She manages 2 theaters for, and I've probably talked about this before, but she has to work when you work for the movie theater, you have to work weekends, holidays, nights. Like those are the busiest times, and that's when everyone wants to make plans. So
it's funny. I've never had a job where that wasn't my schedule. Like, because when I was in TV, even the racetrack was probably the closest I had to a normal job like that, and that still ran from like 4 till 10 every single night, or 4 to 11.
I didn't know you worked at the racetrack.
Oh yeah,
Were you a bookie?
No, wish I was a bookie. I would have made more money.
He worked under the bleachers, opened up his. You want to buy a horse?
No, that was my first like career, if you could call it that, job after college. I spent a little bit of time waiting tables looking for a job. Ended up in an MLM for a day.
Oh, no.
That was a fun story.
That you can tell right now.
Oh yeah, sure. But just to finish up the story at hand, I was in the.
You got to get to the one story before you get to the Russian nesting.
Sorry guys, I didn't take my
underneath.
meds this morning.
Sharia is hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked in the TV department up at the track. It was an interesting job for the most part. You either were a tower guy, which thankfully I did a couple of different stints there between jobs, and I was a tower guy for most of my time. And they were awful because they were either freezing cold in winter or they were blazing hot in summer. But like, it was a job where you like worked 5 minutes every 20 because there was just a race every like 20, 25 minutes. So like I wrote like 15 feature-length screenplays while I was up in these particular like towers over the course of several years. So it was a good job in a couple of ways. But yeah, the MLM for a day.
See, that was really good. I think we're on to something.
Yeah. Transitional music. There's actually not that much of a story. Like this was like September of the year I graduated after college. Had had just finished my last summer at Hershey Park because I had a job there at least that I was making money. And I answered an ad it was sports marketing was the thing. And I was like, I worked in sports information in college. Like, this is up my alley. I ended up on what they referred to as an on-the-job site interview for one day where we walked around a neighborhood in Camp Hill selling door-to-door home improvements, pretending that we were with a company that was actually doing construction work on one of the houses until we got chased off by somebody from the HOA, which thankfully cut my day in half, and then I ran away as quickly as possible.
I had a very interesting situation happen at the Marshalls in Mechanicsburg twice. And what happened was Ryan and I were shopping there, and we were approached by two people who had approached me like 3 years prior and tried to get me into their MLM. And so they approached Ryan while we were at the Marshalls, and I recognized them, and I went up to Ryan and I was like, hey, let's not talk to these people. And the people didn't recognize me. And I was like, this is really hilarious. And so when I finally got Ryan away, I was like, they literally tried to coerce me into their scam like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Also, the journalist in me feels the need to say MLM is multi-level marketing.
Thank you.
And basically, it's a pyramid scheme where, I'm sure some of them will argue that they're legitimate and whatever. You get what you give, whatever. But basically, the main thrust of it is you have to recruit other people in the level below you in order for yourself to get paid.
Yeah. So, like, what the distinction is, because I've seen the LuLaRoe documentary series a couple of times. Whenever I'm feeling down, I watch scam documentary series. In fact, I watched the WeWork one last night before I fell asleep. And like the legal distinction for an MLM is you have to make more money from actually selling the product than you do by recruiting people, which is how LuLaRoe got in trouble, was that like their people were making like they were basically breaking even or losing money selling the clothing, but they were getting like $200,000 a month bonus checks for recruiting people to do the same thing. So like that's the legal distinction, is that you can't make more money by people in your network than you can by actually selling your product.
Yeah, and in practice, what usually happens is the person who initially joins the MLM tries to recruit all of their friends. And, if you don't have a lot of friends, you're not going to make a lot of money off of that.
I don't say this much anymore because a lot of their stories have passed me by, but Penn and Teller did an excellent episode on MLMs in general. And this was like 20 years ago, probably they did this episode, or maybe like 15. And they were showing like basically how MLMs were not just scamming people out of money, but were segmenting to scam people out of money. Like they interviewed women who were selling dildos, for instance, men who were selling like man cave products like grills and stuff like that. And they were putting like all this money on to throw these parties to try to get people to buy things, but more importantly, sign up for stuff. And like the sad thing was like every person they asked at the end of the interview was like, how much money have you made doing this so far? And all of them were like, well, I haven't made anything yet, but you have to spend money to make money.
Hope springs eternal. Also, side note, I think John Oliver is the inheritor of that kind of world of comedy explainers.
Yeah.
He also did a really great segment on MLMs a couple of years ago.
I've only just become a recent John Oliver watcher. Like in the years past, like I've watched his show when there's been like an interesting segment that like when he forgave $15 million of medical debt that he bought for like 10 grand years ago. But a show I really was enjoying and I was looking forward to coming back was Jon Stewart's The Problem. But I don't know if you heard about this. It just got canceled for a very sort of not bizarre reason, but sort of sad reason. Jon Stewart wanted to do episodes this next season, which was renewed and paid for, on both China and AI, and Apple would not let him do them. Like they said that those were topics that they did not want to cover because Apple and China are in bed so badly, and I'm sure AI is part of their business model going forward. And Jon Stewart refused to He was like, I'm not going to have the corporate interests of my show dictate what I can and can't do. Wow. And so the show just got canceled a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Well, good for him.
He said that openly?
Yeah.
He went against his corporate overlords?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is
and
a
then
shame.
we never saw Jon Stewart again.
Because the thing I really like about I miss about Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, and what I really liked about The Problem, which if nobody has seen it and has Apple TV, there's 2 seasons and it's very interesting. And what I like about it is Jon Stewart has this weird quality where he does not hold back. Like he will definitely pummel you. Like they did an episode specifically about like the banning of trans affirming care in like Arkansas, for instance. And he interviewed the Attorney General of Arkansas, who was a real piece of work. And he did not hold back on like all of the bullshit that she was spewing. But at the same time, he was a very empathetic person to the people that he was holding accountable for their bad behavior and their bad actions. So it was like a weird mix of holding people accountable, but not being mean at the same time. Just like...
I had to have so I know what you're talking about in terms of like Jon Stewart. I haven't seen a full episode of The Problem, but I've seen clips of it. And so like I can see that part of him. But you also did see a reduced level of that from The Daily Show. I felt that he was very candid and tried to be as honest as possible during that show. And what you were just saying about having a conversation where you're holding somebody accountable but not being mean, I had to have a conversation like that yesterday, like on a personal level. And it's a really fine line, and you know, you want to be empathetic, and like, thankfully, I was able to walk away from that conversation with the other person saying, like, I really thought you were going to come in here, tear me a new one, and just be angry. And I was worried that it would turn into a screaming match and, like, escalate the situation. And he was like, I very much feel like we had a good conversation, and I feel better than before we talked. And I'm like, well, and that's how
lovely to hear.
Yeah, and that's how I feel from like a manager's perspective too. Like I have to have thousands of accountability conversations a year, and I've always told myself that like if you're going to hold someone accountable, it's, you know, you have to remember that it's not about punishing that person. It's about giving them the opportunity to grow and the opportunity to recognize that what they're doing is wrong. Because if, you know, Jon Stewart in that situation, if he's coming in hot, you know, people shut down, they remove themselves, and they're not willing to hear what you have to say. So it's very important to have that measured approach on a personal level, and even on a level as big as Jon Stewart.
Yeah, it's very hard, because I think that this is because there was so much other stuff going on during the Trump years of 2016 to 2020. I think one of the other like super damaging things is like when you see the leadership of your country always doubling down and continuing to just angrily lie when caught in a lie or something like that, that, you know, trickles down to everyone, especially the people that voted for that person. And so, like, the tendency that I would expect in a situation like that is somebody's just going to double down and get angry at me. That's why it's refreshing to have conversations like that where it doesn't happen. So
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't do really anybody any good to kick somebody while they're down. And I find most people are their own worst critics. And so I even said to him yesterday, I was like, I don't think, and this was not Ryan, by the way. I want everyone to be aware.
It was Ryan.
That's why you were about to leave him in the car.
No, no, but I told him, I was like, shit, lost my train of thought because I was worried you guys were thought I was talking about Ryan.
I just always assume you're talking about Ryan.
No, not always. I have other people in my life, weirdly enough. It's so weird.
It's funny that you have other people in your life besides your significant other.
Man, you know, if everyone did that, it'd be a wilder place.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying there, you know, because I'm in the same position where I'm mentoring people in a few of my different professional areas right now. And fundamentally, if you approach it from the level of like, I'm going to try to teach you something. That is, I don't even think of it like, oh, I need to reprimand so-and-so for doing this or not doing this. I want my people to grow. I want them to get better. And whether that's in the context of, you know, a newsroom where I'm trying to show some of my reporters, you know, here's a better way that you could have written this lead. Or, you know, on a film set, you know, an actor tries something, doesn't quite work, so you kind of hash it out with them. You try to get them to give you something a little different. In those contexts, it doesn't pay to come in hot because, like, you know, quite frankly, what you end up getting is the flight, fright, freeze response, where the person just like, oh no, I did something wrong, and they don't ever get to that next step of, okay, how do I fix it?
Yeah.
So I come at those kinds of situations, whether it's in my personal life or my professional life, like, okay, there's something we can change here. let's work through this together and see how we can change this. Now, when it comes to elected politicians and holding them accountable, it's a little different because it's a difference between punching up and punching down.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And you have to, the thing with like elected politicians is like if everybody approached conflict this way, would probably be a better world. But, I feel like there's so many other variables when it comes to like trying to keep our leaders accountable, like leaders of corporations, because you're not just trying. The difference between having like a one-on-one conversation about accountability and on just a personal level, and then talking to the attorney general and saying like, hey, you need to be accountable to this. Well, it's not just that person, because we know that person's not the only person that made the decision. You're trying to hold not only that person, but dozens, if not, way more than that, other people accountable as well. And so when we feel that we're being kind of laid up to slaughter for other people, like we're going to make defenses and we're going to not be able to really accept accountability in that circumstance, because then you're inadvertently accepting accountability for all of the other people involved.
Yeah. Well, and coming at this from a perspective of journalism, so even when you are confronting a public official, the way I look at it is, they are in fact human beings. They are fallible. They make mistakes. And you kind of have to meet that person where they are. The most effective means of confronting that, at least in terms of the first means, is to show the humanity, to show the deleterious effects of whatever decision that they've put out there. I'm not familiar with Hal's example of the Arkansas Attorney General, but I've absolutely had circumstances where I've had to have a conversation with an elected official. Hey, this action that you took, cost taxpayers X amount of dollars, or led to a lawsuit, or resulted in allegations of a hostile work environment, whatever that specific thing might be. The most important thing is to be a human first, to highlight the human toll of these things, and then go from there. Because quite frankly, there are also a lot of bad actors in the world, and the first footing needs to be one of empathy. The first footing is one of how do we fix this? And then if the response isn't, in line with that, then you kind of get a little more sharp-elbowed.
Yeah. I saw, by the way, that you were on Smart Talk this week talking specifically about the book bans, because I know that's something you've covered in York quite a bit, because York has been, as you said, a bad actor in a lot of these situations.
Well, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying York, the entire county.
Sorry, I should not put
word actor.
I should parse my words more carefully when talking.
I have to parse my words too, because in journalism, the story is always more complicated. There are always, even the quote unquote bad actors may have good reasons for what they're doing. The part of the thing there is we've had multiple reporters covering the issues in Central York specifically. So I think that was the reason why they invited me on, was they weren't quite sure which of my reporters should be there to represent the big picture, whereas I've been there the entire time. I've witnessed some of the things that went down. And then the Meredith, our education reporter, was there with me, and she was able to speak to developments in the last year and a half. But the bullet points there are like this group, which it seems like a relatively small group we've shown with our reporting, with Meredith's reporting. A relatively small group of people have been very vocal about trying to remove books from the high school library, and prior to that, from the entire school district curriculum. In the first ban, they removed, hundreds of books, and they all had like one commonality. They were all either written by or about a person of color, which is a pretty blatant thing. And then the second one, a school board candidate, one person filed objections to 3 specific books, largely on grounds that they contained some kind of sexual content. the school district removed 2 of them from the high school library, which means that literally nobody could read them. And it set off this chain of events involving protests and everything. And the big issue is, okay, who gets to decide what kids can consume? In the old regime, individual parents already had the option of exempting their students from certain things. There seemed to be this push to say, well, no, I as an individual will choose to remove books from every student so that no parent can make that decision on their own. And that's kind of where we're at right now as a society is, we have a lot of folks who are trying to make their view of the world the dominant view, which doesn't really work in a democracy.
Exactly. And I think that that's the real crux of the issue. This is something that from my activism days, I was very vocal about was like censorship and being able to not be influenced by teachers, other people in the community. And I think what you said is very key is that it's up to the parents to decide what content is appropriate. And, I'll be honest, my mom was not the best judge of what content was appropriate for me as a child.
Say.
No, not really. And, the parents aren't going to get it right. But the thing is, like you said, you're assuming that your morality is the morality that makes sense and should be everyone's, and it's just not how it works.
Yeah. See, the way that I kind of look at these is I feel like the book bans, as Wallace was saying, like a couple of parents, for instance, trying to decide what everybody can and cannot do or hear or read. I feel like it's a last grasp at a straw because thankfully, the internet has democratized information and expression of opinion. And I feel like there are, thankfully, avenues that you can read these books or read these opinions without having them in a library. Does it reduce access to everyone? Absolutely. But it's not like the end-all, be-all. It's not like you're cutting off every lifeline from somebody. Kids can still be exposed to, different opinions and different ways of thinking elsewise, and the bad press that the people trying to ban these books are getting, I think will backfire in the end long term, but that could be a while, in my opinion.
And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is believing that progress is a straight line.
There's always backlash.
That has never been the case. Progress is never a straight line. You make strides in one area, you end up falling back in another. And every generation throughout history, throughout modern history, has had folks who have kind of authoritarian tendencies or who want to make their view of the world the only view of the world. And I don't even, I balk at saying, oh, this is specifically a right-wing Christian thing. No, there are fundamentalists in just about every religion, every political affiliation you can imagine. What we need to do is we need to empathize with each other, and we need to emphasize the middle path.
That's what's so important, is because I feel like with a lot of these issues, it isn't solved unless we do one extreme or the other. And unfortunately, when we start to talk about book bans, people say, well, you want to ban all the guns. And how books and guns end up in the same conversation.
Yeah.
Just like
I mean, sure, but yeah. I mean, if you say so.
Right. So, but it's kind of what you were saying. Yes, it restricts access, but it doesn't make it go away.
Yeah.
And that's the argument on the other side about when we say don't ban the books, they say, well, don't ban the guns because they're going to find them anyway. And it's
well, and also, who is they?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
They is often some Russian teenager who's cranking out memes and then putting them out on these fake Facebook groups.
Right.
We're what we need to be doing is ignoring the loudest voices in the room, because the loudest voices in the room are often wrong. They're often, and they have agendas, and
they're simplistic.
And sometimes they're misinformed.
They dial down these issues to something that they feel is easier to understand, and it's that all or nothing thinking. But we have to take this issue and say, okay, is the issue the gun, or is the issue like what they're doing with the gun? And that's the conversation. And the conversation isn't like ban the books or don't ban the books. It's about, how do we allow children to be exposed to healthy content without policing the content that they're getting.
I think a good way to do it, too, is to put it in tangible terms. Because I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Wallace, but like one of the either op-eds or editorials you wrote, this probably was like maybe a year and a half ago when the Don't Say Gay bill was going through. You were putting it more, I remember, in tangible terms, being like, okay, this basically means like if a child in first grade has two fathers, for instance, that they cannot draw a picture of their two fathers because they can't discuss that in school. And that really, like, I was going to hate the Don't Say Gay bill anyway, but that put it into very tangible terms that I could discuss with other people. It's like, they're not talking about hardcore sex here. They're basically banning a child who has like two same-sex parents from even discussing what their home life is.
Yeah, and if you listen to the loudest voices in any given room, often what they are talking about, they're talking about very heady things. They're talking about theoretical concepts.
Yeah.
They're talking about the concept of being gay, the concept of banning guns. But they're not literally engaging with the human impacts of these things. And that's why I think we need to bring down the level of discourse to what happens on a human level.
Right.
What happens individually between people. Because if you talk about what happens, like how your example, which was apparently my example, which I don't remember,
this has become Inception all of a sudden.
But if you think about it on that level, suddenly it clarifies the issue. You're not talking about big, heady concepts.
I'm talking about people.
You're talking about people.
Yeah.
It's sort of like my finance professor used to tell me, like, don't think of money in terms of dollars and cents. Think of it in things that you buy every day, which is why I think of things in terms of Sheets burritos when I purchase them.
And I want to revisit a quick concept that like Hal was talking about with like the access. And I think what's really important is I've said a couple minutes ago, and I think somebody else at some point in the conversation said it, is about like allowing the parents to make that decision for themselves. And you said that. Now, the other side of that coin is that if the access to a certain concept is restricted for a child, and say that that child needs information about something that has been banned from their local school library or...
Well, and we have a specific example in the Central York case. One of the books was Precious by Sapphire,
I've
which became
heard about
an Academy Award-winning movie. And the reason that book was targeted was because it contained some sexual material. The material that it contained was about a young woman who was trying to get away from her family because her stepfather was raping her. Is it? I hope that's not common in our young people, but I know in my own family I had sexual abuse happen to me. So there are going to be, and we're talking high school level. We're not. This book wasn't in the middle school or elementary school.
That is a very good distinction to hear as well, because I feel like whenever they phrase these sort of things, they make it seem like first graders were reading Precious, a novel by Sapphire.
Yeah.
Or Dante's Inferno or something.
But
Dante's Inferno is fine though, because that's like religious subtext.
Oh gosh. But there are lots of high school aged kids who are dealing with that kind of thing actively today in the here and the now.
It's not hypothetical.
It is not hypothetical. And I can tell you just from my own experience growing up in a very abusive home, there were specific reference points, books that I read from the high school library, movies that I saw that like I was able to identify with something in them and learn something from them. You remove every piece of objectionable material from our world, you're going to lose that empathy machine. You're going to isolate these kids more than they already are. And what are you going to be left with? You're going to be left with Pat Boone and Paul Anka records, you know?
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing I'm accusing the loudest voices of doing, flattening things. But
Like,
you
why
get
do we
what
have
I'm
to bring
saying.
Paul Anka into this situation? What did Paul Anka do here?
But like, we really do need to ground these conversations in the here and now and the human. And we need to get away from the big picture concepts. And we need to start ignoring the loudest voices because they are, in truth, just confusing the issue. You know, and we need to define when we say they are doing something. We need to define who they is. This is one of the things. And, you know, I'm not calling you out. But, like, just in general, I have so many people in my world who are like, well, they say this and they say that. And when I say, well, who is they? They kind of don't know. And that's where I think media literacy might come in. And I'm sorry, I'm hopping on my high horse. But,
No, that's okay.
Hop on.
but if you look
Nay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hal, the high horse.
Ooh,
Hal
I'm the high
made
horse.
a motion like he's riding a horse.
Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up.
But if you look at the example of Central York, so a single person was responsible for this most recent book ban. One person submitted these complaints that led to the removal of these books from the high school library. And then on the other side of it, the school district spent some 6, 7, 8 months. Meredith reported all of this blow by blow. They spent all this time figuring out what to do in response to it. They finally passed a library policy that wasn't perfect, but kind of got the job done in terms of grounding it back in. Okay, if a parent objects, they can exempt their kids from a whole class of books or ebooks or whatever. After all that time, after all that energy, after they had a formal policy, one family took advantage of the new policy. One family. So this all started with one person's objections, and then on the other side of it, a single person took advantage of the just the concept of shielding their children from certain materials. So we're not actually talking about a vast conspiracy, and we're not talking about a groundswell of people who want to censor books and movies and whatever. We're really just talking about a few outliers.
Yeah, they always make it sound so ominous. Like there's some kind, like you said, conspiracy. It feels like espionage. Like we're all just trying to sneak books into the school.
Illuminati.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when in doubt, like it really pays to take a few steps back. It pays to listen rather than talk.
Everybody just got to calm down.
Yeah.
Like, just chill. Just.
And if we make all of our decisions out of an emotional response to what is happening, what we're hearing in the here and now, what we're seeing on social media, which is even worse.
Oh, social media is. Oh, you were talking about the loudest voice. That is the entire business model of social media. Is just
engagement. Drive that engagement. Drive that engagement.
Amplifying the loudest voices.
Yeah, which has made our world a worse place, I would argue. Which is like I'm ranting without knowing what I'm talking about in this situation, but just sort of like it seems like that's part of the reason I don't spend as much time on Facebook anymore is because it does seem like it amplifies like some of the worst people in my friend circle saying horrible things, which is why I prefer Instagram, where I just see pet pictures most of the
I kind
time.
of like it because it exposes those people in my friend circle. And I'm like, so you just removed yourself from the equation. Like that keeps me from having to have a conversation, be like, oh, okay, all right. I didn't know you were a Nazi, but all right, see you the door.
Well, yeah.
Speaking of which, this actually did happen in the last year. Like a person who was somebody that I would have considered to be a good friend in film for me, somebody who like was there with me from the very beginning, like when we did Nowhere PA in 2007, and somebody I've always had fun working with. For whatever reason, he's gone down this spiral of like posting, like he was always like a weird conservative posting things, and I was like, yeah, I can suffer that. I like this guy anyway. And he started posting like all these horrible like things about Jewish people, like saying Kanye was right and like, oh, the Jewish people are right, like horrible things. And like, I would not have suffered this anyway, but also dating a Jewish person, I'm like, I can't be around you at all. And this person's reached out to me a couple of times to like want to do things again, and I haven't unfriended them because I just unfollowed them so that like that wasn't another conversation. But like, you know, I just never responded to this person at all because
I'm a hardcore unfollower. Like it doesn't take much for me, especially if I don't, like if I haven't seen you in person in the longest time. Like I have no problem just hitting a button. And I know a lot of people, so like my stepmom, for example, is still friends with my ex-boyfriend from like 10 years ago. And I'm just like, why? And she's just like, well, I just don't unfriend people. Like, he's not bothering me. I'm not bothering him. Like, he didn't do anything to me. And I'm like, okay, well, he did things to you by extension. But it's just like, ride or die, I thought, but maybe not. But like, it doesn't take much for me. And that's kind of the thing where I don't know. So Ryan is very much like anti-ghosting. He doesn't like, just cutting people off like on social media and stuff like that. And I just do it all the time because I think for me, it's like if that person does try to reach out to me, they have, and if it's somebody I care about, they do have methods that are not social media to contact me. And like if they have a question as to why I did that, I will be happy to tell them. But I don't feel the need to confront somebody who posts something, who I don't talk to, who I don't really care about, feel indifferent about. They post something racist or sexist or what have you on social media. I don't have to interact with that person to just decide that I don't want to be associated with them.
See, I think this is like another aspect that's underrated about this, like you were saying with the posting, is that like these aren't just weird inner dialogues this person has with each other. This is like horrible stuff that they feel comfortable enough putting out there into the universe that nobody reacts to, by the way. Like they don't get any like likes or stuff like that. I don't know if this is weird, but there are a couple of people like in my circle who do nothing but post horrible things that I still will read occasionally just for entertainment value. Like, why did you say this? Or why did you post this? It's not funny. There's no joke involved with it, and you just look like an asshole. So there's a little bit of Schadenfreude, I guess, there with doing that. I mean, it's the same part of me that likes watching the Fire Festival documentary when I'm feeling down, I suppose.
That's
both of them.
Wow. I haven't thought about the Fire Festival for a few years.
I watch the documentary pretty regularly, Wallace. Because first off, it is directed by Chris Smith, who is my favorite absolute documentarian. He was the guy who did American Movie, which, depending on what day you ask me, may be my favorite movie of all time. Not even documentary, but period. And just like, it's so entertaining because like, it was a huge disaster, but in the end of the day, the stakes weren't super high. Like nobody got killed, and it was just like a bunch of affluent people basically stranded Lord of the Flies style. My ex-girlfriend had a lot of thoughts on why I watched that documentary when I'm feeling down, and she's like, Hal, you need to talk about this with somebody. I think she was overreacting, but like that's why we're not together anymore. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and yeah, that is an interesting thing because there are absolutely pieces of media that I adore, but I'm a pretty chill person in life. Like I don't have a lot of big dramatic upheavals. That was all in my childhood. I left it behind. I don't do drama anymore.
Yay.
But I still like to dabble. Like I like
to dabble.
I dip my toe into like movies about that thing.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like every once in a while you're like when you need a little tickle, you just pick someone at random on your friends list to start beef with.
I wish I was more like you, Wallace. My life would be easier, but my brain is just like, I don't know, not wired that way.
Oh, and it took a lot of work. And I know I sound like Jesus right now. I'm not Jesus. I'm not perfect. I still have all sorts of interactions where I walk away and I'm kicking myself. Like, did you really need to say that? You could have not said that, and that would have been fine.
Oh gosh, one of my favorite things is so when I walk away from a situation, I get myself for the things I didn't say, but then I am always really proud of myself when I say the first thing that came to my head, which is usually hilarious and also a little bit spicy. And so I love those moments where I'm like, I didn't hold back. Yes.
There's a great discussion of this. I think I've talked about Nora Ephron on this podcast before. I love Nora Ephron.
By the way, like I actually started like as a quick aside, I did not know she was married to it's not Nicholas Pileggi, it's the other Pileggi. The guy who wrote Goodfellas and Casino, because I was going down like a Scorsese Wikipedia hole the other day, and Pileggi, the author Pileggi who wrote those books, was married to Nora Ephron, and I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either, actually.
Nicholas Pileggi played Skinner on The X-Files, and I can't think of what the other Pileggi's name is, and that's going to kill me. Everybody's looking at me like I'm a crazy person right now.
I was just trying to see, like, I was like, it was a little competition to see if either one of you would come up with the other one, and
I know the name Pileggi wrote Goodfellas. I don't know the first name of that Pileggi.
It's going to bother me so much I'm looking it up right now.
All right, but in the meantime,
back to my original train of thought.
The catchphrase of the podcast.
No, it is Nicholas Pileggi. I guess. I wonder who Skinner was on the X-Files then.
You've been incepted. I'm sure there's more than one Pileggi.
They're the only two I can think. It's weird because I don't know if your brain works this way, but like if two celebrities, and in this case I do consider Nicholas Pileggi to be a celebrity, have the same last name, I weirdly connect them to each other. Like another example is Milo Ventimiglia, who will always be Jess on Gilmore Girls for me, despite all of his success afterwards. And then John Ventimiglia from The Sopranos. I always have it in my head that they're related, and they're not related, even in the littlest bit.
Huh.
Weird.
Yeah.
Back to what you were saying.
Sorry. Back to your original point.
There's a great discussion of your point.
I don't even remember what we're talking about anymore.
Which one, Wallace said?
Oh,
Nora Ephron. That's where we were.
The idea of like you finally get a chance to say exactly what you wanted to say, and then you're like, oh, did I really need to say that? There's one of the romantic comedies that I absolutely love, and I don't love a lot of them. They're very shallow, yada yada yada. But You've Got Mail, written and directed by Nora Ephron. Love the movie for many reasons. It is very much it is a creation of its time for sure, but it's got all sorts of really fun little life lessons, and it is legitimately funny because Nora Ephron was legitimately funny. And one of the things that there's this interaction between Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan's characters in which Meg Ryan finally gets to tell off Joe Fox, played by Tom Hanks. She's been wanting to do this. She finally does, and as soon as she does it, she's like, oh, I didn't need to be that mean. And kind of dwells on it for a while. And it's a minor plot point, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I've absolutely been in situations where I said exactly what I wanted to say, and it didn't give me any kind of catharsis. It didn't make me feel better.
I think it's because I spent so long over-regulating myself. And that's something that I've been working on in the last year, and I've talked about it before, where like I was in survival mode for so long. So anytime I was face-to-face with a negative emotion, I just swerved it. I haven't processed. But then I started doing that to everything. And so like starting to process emotions and like not overanalyze my next move before saying or doing something helps really well in a professional environment. It doesn't help very much in my personal life.
Sure.
And other than like I get to maintain relationships with people that I would rather tell off. And so you'd think that would be a great skill, but
that's your prize, is you maintain the friendship of people you don't want to maintain friendship with.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it's complicated too. It's all about your context. Because I can absolutely relate to that. You know, in my childhood, the way I survived was to just for a long time keep my head down and just move through the world as quietly as I could.
Yeah.
Excelling in one area or another, but doing it like kind of on the down low.
Weirdly enough, and it's strange I haven't mentioned it to either of you because it would be definitely something that I would bring up. So an example of this is like I never at any point in cutting my mom out of my life actually said to her, like, I don't want a relationship with you. I just cut her off, called it a day. Well, a couple weeks ago, she pulled some other nonsense, and
Was this the hospital situation, or was this a different one?
This was a different one. It was just a couple weeks ago. It was for our wedding shower, and she sent my brother came, which was nice, and I was glad that he was there. She gave him a card to give to me, and Ian at least had the foresight not to put it on like the pile of gifts and cards and things. But he did give it to me, and I opened it, and there was cash inside, which I never accept money from my mother ever because it's always transactional. The card was addressed specifically to me, just me, not Ryan also. Didn't really address Ryan at all in the card and like all that kind of thing.
What a weird card to give somebody for a shower then.
I know,
That you pretend like the other spouse doesn't exist.
Do you want, it literally said on the front of the envelope, it said to my gorgeous girl, Shannon. That's what it said. And so everything this woman does is a manipulation. Anyway, so again, I said to Ian, I was like, I don't feel comfortable taking money from our mother. Please take this. And he got upset and he didn't want me to give it back. And so I ended up using it to pay for his suit that he needs for our wedding.
Okay, that's a good pay it forward.
Yeah. And then I tried to give him the change, but he was like, no. And I was like, fine, I'll put it in like our new house fund. And like, then that way I'll feel a little bit better about it. And I got so frustrated because she constantly puts him in a position to use him to try and get in contact with me, is always sending messages through him or asking him to ask me to do things, like making him the messenger. And so that day I texted her and I said, I want to be clear. I do not want a relationship with you, and I do not want you to use Ian to contact me anymore. That's done. And I felt so good. I never actually said that to my mom. And so, like, these are things that over the last year of, like, healing process has gotten me to, of being able to stand up for myself and be assertive and tell people, like, what I want in a nice and respectful way. I felt that, and I didn't go off on her. I just said, I don't want a relationship with you. Stop using my brother as your pawn.
Yeah, that is high five.
High five from across the way.
And what you're describing there is like a boundary. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, especially when I look on social media, people don't understand what boundaries are. The boundary isn't what you demand of other people. So in your case, the boundary is you've had such a bad time with this woman that you no longer want to have a relationship with her, regardless of the blood ties that you might have, regardless of the familial obligations that you feel pressured to fulfill. You do not want to have a relationship because things have gotten so bad and they consistently don't seem to get better. That is actually not the boundary. The boundary is when you enforce. The boundary is the point which you just did, where you say, hey, I can't do this anymore. Please stop doing this to me. So you have to be willing to stand by that, which you're doing. And that is what a boundary is. A boundary is not making big demands from everyone in your life, like, oh, I have issues about money, so don't talk about money in front of me. That kind of, like, you're that is part of the process. You can tell someone, hey, I have issues with this. Please don't, bring this up to me. But the actual where the boundary begins is when you enforce it. If someone like crosses that threshold that you've set, and then you say, no, I need a minute. I have to leave this conversation. If that makes sense, like that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's something I had to learn because, like, early in my own healing process from the stuff that I lived through, there were times when I absolutely, like, I would not enforce a boundary, and then quite suddenly, after someone had repeatedly, crossed that threshold that I thought I had set, I would just explode.
Right. And I think that's important too, is what you're saying, like in setting that boundary. If you don't communicate, people don't know what your boundaries are. And so by just not responding to my mom and by just in my head being like, I don't talk to this person, she never had that scope. Like she never had that objective piece of it of like me saying to her, like, this is not what I want, and standing up for myself. And so I see exactly what you're saying in like, you have to be and it's so hard because, like, yes, it hurts when you have a boundary and people continue to push that boundary. But the healing starts when you can tell someone that they're hurting you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like, I never thought about, like, establishing the boundary is not the boundary, it's how you enforce it. It's like the Maginot line of your head, basically. Like, if you're not willing to send everything to defend it, it's not actually a boundary.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? It's not an easy thing to do because in order to enforce a boundary, well, first you have to communicate it. If you never communicated it, then it's as though it doesn't exist.
But it exists for you, and that's valid. Sorry, I wanted to, put that out there for the listeners. We got this in the brain, but
the first step is like creating the boundary in your head. The second step is communicating the boundary to other people.
Yeah.
And then the third step, and the most important step, is actually enforcing it. Being willing to walk away from someone or have a confrontation potentially with them when that boundary gets crossed after you've communicated it. A lot of people I see, they might stop either at the first or the second steps. They have a boundary in their head. They think they've communicated it, but they didn't really, and so they get angry constantly because they haven't communicated it, or they've communicated it, but then they don't actually follow through and enforce the boundary. So it's as though it doesn't exist there.
This is a lower stakes like example, but as you were saying that, I was just thinking about like what in my life recently has been a boundary that I've enforced. And we've actually had something at work where there's a person out on FMLA who calls out all the time. And so usually we're called in to like cover for this person. And I said enough times, like especially on weekends where I had shoots or something, I'm like, no, I cannot do this, cannot. And I realize I've stopped being asked to do it because I've enforced that boundary. And on the reverse side, there's this poor guy in my office who is kind of a doormat and will cover anytime, anywhere. And we were trying to encourage him last weekend, like, if this person calls off, don't offer to fill in. Like, you're going to keep getting asked for it all the time. And sure enough, on Sunday, I saw him coming in. It was less than 24 hours after his granddaughter was born. And he still came in to cover for this person. And I'm like, oh, you like
go home.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I feel bad for you. And like, I guess on some level, it's nice that you offered to do this, but you got to have some boundaries, man. Otherwise, because he's the only person who gets asked regularly, because he's the only person who will not, as you say, Wallace, enforce the boundary in that situation.
Yeah. Well, and like some next level, like galaxy brain conversation on this point, boundaries are fungible. Like they're constantly changing, even in our own heads. So we have to keep communicating them and enforcing them as we communicate them. Because, like, for example, when you're 20 years old, the threshold for how late someone can ask you to join them for a party, you're like, oh, you get a text message, you show up at the party 5 minutes later. Right? But
well, not me in my 20s, but I get you.
Some people.
I see what you're saying.
Quite honestly, I wasn't in that group either. But I'm using it for illustrative purposes.
Party? What are you talking
about? For the
normies
out there.
For all you kids that were having fun drinking your Frank's Red Hot down by the pond.
But boundaries are situational, and they change over time. So when you're 20 years old, you don't bat an eye at, like, your best friend invites you to a party and you show up 5 minutes later. Well, later, when you have 2 kids and a house and a mortgage and you have to get up the next morning, you're like, no, you have to give me like a week's notice before I show up at a party. Yeah. And the other thing is, they're deeply personal. So I don't know your colleague's situation, but maybe, just speculating, maybe he wants to make as much money as he can.
Oh, no, we can't make any extra money. This is unpaid / you get like a couple of hours off another day that week.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, there's no, when you're at our level, we're salary, so there's no extra money involved. But
they are deeply personal too, and so like what might be a boundary for you, for someone else, like there are situations in their life that they don't share those same values.
And it's also about where you're at too, because like I'll tell you that for the longest time, I'm so sorry.
We were just talking about
what
this.
Happened was,
that's really a comforting. I love your ringtone.
That's actually my alarm ringtone too, because that's what went off at like. Usually I have my Alexa give me the alarm, which is Jason Schwartzman telling me to wake up. But I'm at my parents' house dog sitting, so that was my alarm this morning.
Well, I mean, just as a quick aside, like my medications have been changing. And so did I tell you this? Instead of taking meds once a day at nighttime when I'm used to taking them, I have to take them 3 different times a day, in the morning, at lunchtime, and at night. And I'm doing so bad, guys. I'm doing so bad. I've had to set alarms that I don't like. Listen, I'm supposed to take my meds right now. Where are my meds? They're at home. I don't know what to do.
Oh God.
So
just
I
drink
was supposed
more
to take
coffee?
them this morning. Did I take them this morning? No. And so the alarms don't work. It's a whole thing. Anyway, back to what we were talking about.
That's rough.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, no way would I remember to take something 3 times a day.
And so
I just have to take 1 a day, basically.
So like Tuesday,
maybe
I was
you
depressed.
Need to get one of those like.
Yesterday, I was depressed. And like.
But you're on a depression vacation right now.
Oh, but I don't have the meds for that lead to the vacation.
I did not mean it was supposed to be a joke. I did not mean to negate what you were saying.
No, it's totally fine. But I was getting back to like the boundaries. Like it's about where you're at, because I've had so much emotional like transformation over the last year that like last year, same shit. Like I never would have said anything to my mom, not once. And with like covering shifts and things like that, there are really little things that I'm finally setting a boundary with that I'm so excited. So for example, my dad is going to be in Florida for the next 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I agreed to watch his cat because she's old and she's got special needs. And so I agreed to that, no problem. Like, and I could set a boundary. I could be like, no, I can't. But it's not terribly outside of the realm of what I can do. So I was like, great. So I texted my dad yesterday and I said, hey, I'm just going to crash at your house for those 3 days to reduce the driving time. Can you, are the sheets on your guest bed clean? And he said, no, they need washed. And so I know my dad and I know me. And a year ago, what would have happened was I would have said, okay, then went to his house tomorrow and washed and dried the sheets and went through the whole process of cleaning them so that I could sleep in that bed. And so I yesterday texted him back and I said, can you please clean those sheets before you leave? And
Nice.
I like threw a little goddamn party for myself. I was like, I'm gonna have a glass of wine, and like,
it's a sheet party, a party for my sheets.
But it was a little thing, but like that's ultimately going to save me 3 hours of headache tomorrow, and like. I have to work all day tomorrow. It takes me 45 minutes to drive to work from my house. It's going to take 45 minutes to drive from work to my dad's house. That's why I'm staying at his house, because otherwise I'd be driving 3 hours a day.
The least he could do is change the sheets for you.
Right. I was like, my boy, you work at home, so just throw them in while you're doing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation before. I think we share some of that parentified child syndrome where... You know, as a kid, because you didn't have certain needs met, you just do things without asking anybody for help.
Yep.
I do. I have a.
You
would
have done it too, wouldn't you? You would have You would have gone and done those sheets, and I was.
And you don't always have to.
No, that's true. And
you can ask people.
That was
for
fucking
help.
news to me. Yeah. And like I am so happy with like the growth and being able to speak my mind a little bit more, and not even in a mean way, just saying that like this is how this makes me feel, or just saying that like I don't have the bandwidth and I really need you to pitch in for whatever. So,
Yay for sticking up for yourself.
Yeah.
Hug and high five at the same time. Hug five.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I felt a little bad about it, but not a whole lot of bad about it. But that's what I did when I bailed on improv practice this week. I don't normally do that, but I just I was exhausted.
It sounded like it was a
starting
day.
to feel sick.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't really want to drive to Lincolnstown as much as I love Christine. I don't want to drive to Lincolnstown and do, practice. Now,
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out in an hour if I'm any good.
Yeah, I think you'll be good. So
Yeah.
it's that was kind of how I felt on Wednesday too. Like I felt like I was getting sick already, and it was a weird day where I didn't actually have to do a ton at work, but I still had to stay till 8, and I was really struggling. And then the next day was even worse because I absolutely did have to go to work, so it was a long day. Took off Friday and basically did not leave my parents' house because they're out on a trip right now from Friday and Saturday, which has been helpful because I feel like a functioning human being today for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely not 100% functioning.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have about 10 to 15 minutes left. Let's get to the Ryan section of the podcast, which is where we stop being so depressing for a slight period of time.
We do that?
I'm calling it the Ryan section because Ryan
love
always
that.
tells us to talk about fun
That's
things.
so cute.
Meanwhile, Ryan is sitting in the green room.
Having his own little depression.
Guys, I
Not
actually
a
locked
vacation.
Ryan in the bathroom just
Oh
to
my
make sure
God.
that if he had an accident, he didn't pee on the carpet. So limit the damage.
That's hilarious.
I'm
my
sorry,
gosh.
Ryan. He doesn't listen to this anyway.
No,
so.
he doesn't.
But yeah, I did want to talk to you about because we have Vidjam coming up. The screening is going to be this Sunday because we will probably not have another episode published until then. Yeah, so I've seen. So I haven't watched any, even though I've put together the screener. I have not watched any of the movies in their entirety. I've just skimmed through them trying to find images of the prop just for the end title card because I want to be as surprised as possible. So I've seen a little bit here and there of your movie, and it looks really interesting.
Well, yeah, and the big reveal, the final reveal of the prop is actually, if you use that, it'll be a mild spoiler.
Okay, so I won't talk about the prop, but I will say I thought in as vague terms as possible when we handed out your prop to you, I kind of some of the props. And this is a little bit biased towards me because I spend a lot of time going to thrift stores and finding things I think will be really interesting. And then some of the props I feel like were just sort of picked up and thrown together. And I felt like yours was one of those ones. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of a lame prop. And you did very interesting things with it from the few things I had to pull for the title card.
Yeah, so this one is I'm proud of. I'm proud of every short film that I've ever made. I've learned something off of every one of those shoots. Mm-hmm. But this one, it just, I love this short. I'm eager to see it on the big screen.
Me too.
And I'm eager for people to see it and kind of see what their reactions are. Going back to the parentified child thing where you try to do everything. I do feel like on some of my shoots previously, I have done that. I think it serves me well in many areas. It even serves me well when I'm making a movie because as Carol has mentioned to me, Carol Kromicki, one of my frequent collaborators, you always have a very definite vision for what you want this thing to be. You're open to suggestions, but especially when I'm working with actors, I'm very specific in, here's the emotion we're trying to convey. Can you try this? Could you think about a time when this happened and channel that into your performance? So I am very specific, and I have a very specific idea in my head for what I want sequences to look like and how I want the acting and performances to go, the direction the narrative goes. But sometimes there have definitely been shoots where at the end of it, I am just completely spent because I am trying to do everything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the jobs of multiple people.
Boy, does that sound familiar.
Right?
Yeah.
And for this one, I think I did a much better job of delegating tasks and trusting people to do those tasks. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Josh, the night before, even though he couldn't be there on set the whole day, I had Josh whip up the blood. And
I remember because you came to my house for the fog machine. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go. Because I remember I offered you fake blood, and Josh is like, nah, I'll just make it myself.
Yeah, so I like tasked Josh with taking lead on some of the gore effects. And he was also able to come on set and actually...
You went Super Saiyan. I had to capture it.
Oh, no, don't take that. I do not like candid pictures taken of myself, especially now. So,
Stories.
Yeah, that's okay. You're setting a boundary and enforcing that boundary.
Exactly.
Yes.
yeah, this is, as a quick aside, this is part of the reason I don't go out and do as much stuff anymore. I don't really like having candid pictures taken of me, and there are a lot of people in our circles who not only take nothing but pictures everywhere you go, but take videos of every single thing happening. And I am a very big, like, with a few exceptions, like, live in the moment. Like, who the fuck is going to look at this video of me doing karaoke again ever? Like, just enjoy the moment sort of thing. And I really don't like it when people do that with me.
I straddle that line. I see you. I have at times had the same view of things. I've gotten a little bit more active on social media lately because I'm starting to see the other side of it, which is, especially when you have more good things happening, you kind of want to be able to, a year or two from now, go back and look at those good things, you know. So I kind of think of it as like an insurance policy for future depression.
Well, there was, like, speaking in that,
Exactly.
like, a weird thing that, because Lauren and I had our first anniversary about a month ago, and I realized we didn't have a single picture together of the entire year that we were, like, together. I was like, I've taken pictures with her dog, but we never took a picture together. Isn't that weird? And she was like, yeah, we were just too busy having a good time. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I can see on both sides of it.
For sure. And, you know, I appreciate you communicating that boundary with me. And thank you for that. And I will say that, you know, there are some times where I'm like, oh, I wish I would have captured a picture, or, you know, just because, like, for that reason, like, getting to look back at it. But a lot of times I do like to, I'll actually think about when I'm looking at something and be like, that's so beautiful, or like, this is such a great memory.
Yeah.
But I'll actively think to myself, like, you know what, I don't want to ruin it by pulling out my phone. So I do, like, I'm very cognitive of that. And then, but I did tell Ryan, like, this year, with it being our engagement year, I was like, I want to take more pictures of, like, things that we did during the year that we were engaged and, like, that kind of thing. And then, of course, like, I'm going to be just as sentimental about, like, the first year of our marriage, and, like, and I probably will never end with that and be like, but it's the second year of our marriage, you know, but.
See, these are all good reasons to take, like, lots of photos and videos. What I'm kind of talking about
but
is.
Everything.
Not every. Yeah. Well, the people that I'm talking about in our circle of acquaintances, this will sound cruel, and I do not mean this to sound cruel, but it seems like, for people who take way too many videos and photos and post them online, I feel like they're trying to convince the world that they're having the best time possible.
Yeah, it's not about capturing the memories for them.
I want to just live in the moment for the most part. Also, I don't like the way I look right now, and I just don't want thousands of videos and photos of me posted every which way, every single day, everywhere. Like, a couple here and there are okay, but, like, you know, again, I want to just live in the moment. I don't want a video of me walking down the street eating a cheeseburger. I just want to taste the cheeseburger.
Yeah. There are some things it's nice to, like, keep to yourself. And I do that from time to time. And I've been trying to do that with my stories too. Like, I feel like I tell people, like, every funny thing that happens to me. But sometimes I'm just like, you know, I'm just going to let that be a thing and live in its space. And, like, it doesn't have to be carried with me in a story but I have so many stories, and I love telling stories, and generally people enjoy my stories, I think, anyway.
See, that's part of my job, is entertaining older Pennsylvanians every single night. So I have to, like, tell stories, and usually the same ones a couple of times over and over again. But yeah, it's a...
That's what scares me about the podcast. Like, I got so many stories that are really, really good, and I'm afraid I've probably repeated them like 4 or 5 times over the course of a year.
Like, I was thinking about that when Wallace was talking about You've Got Mail, because I was like, oh, we discussed this on the Christmas episode.
Yeah. But in a different context. It's fine if you're talking about it, you know.
But anyway, that was an interesting topic that came up out of nowhere for you taking a picture of my Super Saiyan.
But it worked out because it was boundaries, and it was good.
Yeah. It was relevant to the topic we just got done discussing.
Yeah.
I do want to get back to the Vidjam stuff, though, because
and really quickly, everybody got to see an example of what it can look like.
Yeah.
And when you get a chance to
enforce.
Set a boundary with a friend that, like, is a healthy, you know, interaction. So. Now we're good.
Yeah, yay. But yeah, the
Vidjam.
going back to Vidjam. So I have the screener compiled. It is 3 hours and 52 minutes.
I can't whistle. I don't know if you guys knew that.
I don't know how it got so big because, like, when Sam had initially, well, actually, I have a couple of ways it got big. Sam had initially told me it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes worth of material. We did have one super late submission that is not going to be in the competition, but we're still letting them screen at the end, and it was a full 15-minute movie. But then there's also a 15-minute intermission and 10 minutes for voting. Not to mention there's like 30 seconds of title cards for every one of the movies. So it got up to about 4 hours total runtime, and that's including intermission and voting. So it's going to be pretty good. Again, haven't watched any of the movies, including the one that was shot in my house. I haven't watched either. I've just like scrolled through just to get your prop, and I'll be as surprised as anybody when I get to see them. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Wallace's. Really looking forward to see ours too on the big screen because I think it's going to play pretty well. My parents are actually going to come out to it.
That's exciting.
Because my dad has a fairly... You could make the case that my dad has more lines of dialogue significantly than everyone else combined in the entire movie.
Good for him.
Yeah.
It's his breakthrough performance.
He was funny in it, too. He conveyed this weird sense of, like, dignity as he was saying ridiculous things, but also weird foreboding and weird humor at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be a fun thing. And I'm really looking forward to it because that's going to be... my vacation starts on Saturday, and Vidjam is going to be day 2 of Hal's vacation, which hopefully he's not sick for. So,
beautiful. Yeah.
But yeah, Wallace, do you have anything coming up you want to tell the world about?
Oh, well, so I've started posting little videos to YouTube.
The YouTube?
Is it on
The
your primary
YouTubes.
channel, or is it a different channel?
It's my primary channel.
Okay.
I hear the kids these days talking about the YouTube.
No, they're talking about the Tic Tacs.
I was going to say it's the old people who talk about the YouTube.
YouTube is the Tic Tacs for the millennials. So I'm just kind of experimenting. I have a few film projects that I'm in the process of like organizing schedules around and wrangling actors for and polishing scripts for.
Woohoo.
So, but probably I will probably, I'm just a wild guess, I probably won't get to shoot those until the new year. So in the meantime, I'm like, I want to experiment more with motion graphics. I want to experiment more with like on-screen delivery. I want to, and also the other thing is like, I don't have a huge following, but I managed to like cobble together a small following on YouTube, and I'm like, I want to leverage this and see if I can get more people to see my stuff.
Nice.
And one way to do that is to do these quick hit kind of explainer videos.
No, that sounds awesome.
Those videos tend to get like a lot of like... there's one person in our comedy circle who I would not consider to be a particularly good comedian who does exactly those. Like he posts 30 seconds to 1 minute like clips on there, and he gets like a 500 to 1,000 views on some of these for like what are not good jokes.
I've heard things about it was something I heard recently that apparently on Spotify, like the listenership, like for newer artists, like the artists are finding out that they need to have their hook within a certain amount of seconds to get the best amount of listenership. And you have to listen to whatever is posted on Spotify for at least 30 seconds for it to be considered listened. So their hook needs to be within the first 30 seconds. And then ideally, like for the full listens, usually songs like under 3 minutes are kind of like that. They're saying like keeping your song to about there will increase your listenership.
Otherwise, the algorithm will bury you.
Yeah, it's and I just think that kind of thing is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool you got so much stuff. I feel like every year after Horror Vidjam, I'm kind of like, I have all these projects I want to do, and then I've done literally none of them like since then. So hopefully this year...
Well, I can absolutely relate because the nice thing about Vidjam, because there's a deadline... You can't keep working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, clearly, because a bunch of people dropped out. But
yeah, we had I don't know if I mentioned this on the program, but we had an astonishing number of did not finishes for this one because we had 25 total registrations and only 18 completed movies for it, 2 of which are not eligible. So only 9 people did movies that were, or 9 people did not finish their movies in time for eligibility. So but yeah, like, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. And
That's okay. That's all right. This is a podcast.
It's a conversation.
We're all interrupting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you have coming up, Shannon?
Nothing.
Wedding
That's a big lot of something coming up.
in like 3 weeks.
Dude, it is just under 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks as of yesterday. So ramping up. So I think I actually had to bail on the show I was supposed to be on last night. I felt so bad, but my acid reflux was kicking my ass and I was vomiting and stuff. It was no fun.
Everyone's sick right now.
Well, I mean, for me, it was just because my esophageal whatever.
Yeah.
But so I've actually, drop the bomb on the last minutes of the podcast is I think I'm gonna be taking like an official step back from stand-up.
Okay.
I want to focus on some other parts of my creativity that I really enjoy and I haven't been able to really put the time towards. I feel like stand-up recently has been a weight on me, and I really want to focus on like spending more time with friends and family. And
that's good.
Also, like, I'd like to do more acting. I'd like to do more like theater and things like that. So I think I'm going to put some energy towards that and continuing to do the podcast and put more energy towards that as well, of like, being more engaged with it. And so really just looking forward to focusing on me and Ryan being married and looking forward to what comes next.
Yay.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Hopefully I'll have some new and interesting things that I am doing to talk about. So
if you want to do more acting, let's put movies together this off season, like we always plan to do but never do. So.
Oh yeah, I'm open to all sorts of things. So like if there's anyone who needs me for something, I'll make the time.
Yeah. I guess for me, just we have a double dose of offbeats in the next 7 days, because we have offbeats in about 2.5 hours now, and then we have our main show at the Harrisburg Improv Theater Friday night, which might be the first show Ryan does.
Yay.
I don't know. If we get a practice in, maybe it'll be nice for me to be able to sing again. And Ryan is a significantly better piano player than I am, so it'll be fun. But yeah, then it's just Vidjam on Sunday night at 5 p.m. If anybody wants to get tickets, you should probably... I say you should do so now, but I don't think Sam has still posted a link to buy tickets online.
Yeah,
as much as I've been hounding him.
My crew was blowing up my Facebook Messenger.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the group chats, but we don't have the time. So.
Yeah, and one of the questions was, where do we buy tickets? And I don't know. so how? That's something you could answer like off air.
We can post it.
I can't, because we don't have a ticket link, because Amandine also texted me like days ago, and I'm like, we should have it soon. We'll try to get it. So, but yeah.
Be on the lookout.
Yeah, there'll be an announcement someplace, somewhere, sometime, somehow. But yeah, this has been fun. Thank you, Wallace, for coming and being our friend, as always. Thank you, Ryan, for waiting in the bathroom for all of us.
Yeah, I've been hearing him scratching at the door. Poor guy. He probably needs to go out.
And whining. So you haven't toilet trained him yet.
No, and it's been a struggle.
You've toilet trained him so well that he won't go piddle on the bathroom floor, even though it's got tile.
Yeah.
I feel kind of bad referring to Ryan as a dog, but I don't think he would care.
No, he literally said as we were walking in that he has golden retriever energy. So
same.
Yeah, he invited the comparison.
We love him.
Anyway, this has been a fun discussion about boundaries, about like drama, about book bans, and about fun stuff.
Yes.
So thank you all for listening. Until next week. This was episode 50, by the way. Just so So until next week, I've been Hal.
I've been Shannon.
And I'm Wallace.
And have a nice week, and we'll talk to you again soon.